afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Friday forum entitled The Wrong Guy, What Happened to Brandon Mayfield. Well, that's unusual, and how nice of you. For any of you who are regulars, this is another one of our Guest the Guest Friday programs, because if you read in the program and saw it online, we were hoping to have a representative from the government here. So part of as you know, it's a major mission of the City Club to have the full range of views. But we spent quite a lot of time talking with the FBI and with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they declined to be here. But I did get a letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the FBI, when I asked them for something in writing, just said, refer to this letter. So let me read it to you just to be sure we are absolutely accurate. It's from KRAMER, who's the U.S. Attorney. She said, I must decline to accept your invitation to speak at the City Club this Friday on a panel with Federal Public Defender Steve Wax and Brandon Mayfield. Unfortunately, because of Privacy Act issues, grand jury secrecy issues, and the possibility of a civil lawsuit, it would be inappropriate for me to participate. Thank you again for considering me. I would welcome the opportunity to speak at the City Club about other matters in the future that do not raise these concerns. So there you have it. I'm sure we'll have a very interesting program today with Brandon and Steve, because Brandon will be relating his experience, what it's like to be held, and he was, as you know, held in connection with the Madrid bombings. And he was held by the FBI, and it was based on, as it turned out, erroneous fingerprint evidence. And one of the reasons we wanted the government here was to say what happened and how did it happen, and can it happen again? Have there been any policy changes based on what happened with this case? Because we want to know, this shows how the war on terrorism can affect lives of ordinary citizens. So we want to know more, but we'll know quite a bit more by the end of today's program. Before we get on with the program, I would like to make a few of the announcements for City Club. Just a note, and you'll need to adjust your memory chip or your Palm Pilot for this. This will be our last regular program held here at the Multnomah Athletic Club. They have been wonderful hosts to us, and we have very much appreciated it. But we are moving back downtown, and beginning Friday, July 9th, we will have our regular scheduled meetings at the Governor Hotel. So there will be no program July 2nd, and the next program on July 9th will be held at the Governor, and it's will be featuring Alan Durning, who is the head of the Northwest Environment Watch, talking about measuring what matters, the Cascadia scorecard. And this scorecard is an index of key trends, providing an assessment of how the region is doing in creating environmentally sound policies. And they track the critical issues of health, economy, population, energy sprawl, sprawl, forests, and pollution. So that's June 9th at the Governor. On our upcoming special events, we have a program scheduled with the new leaders and the Advocacy Awareness Committee. It's called Advocacy 101, How to Improve Your Game. And that sort of fits right in. We're very clever speech writers here, and because it was going to be a game of bowling at the Grand Central Bowl from 6 to 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, July 13th. Beth Capsh of the Children First of Oregon will also be there to talk about the nuts and bolts of advocacy for beginners. So there's learning and there's fun. It's $5 for members and $7 for non-members. Our Citizens Read book group that will be held on Monday on the chaotic age is full. We seem to have this habit of selling out our events. And it will be moderated by Dr. John Kitzhaber. So sorry, but those that are signed up, I'm sure will find it very interesting. Our July book will also be very interesting. It's called Reading Lolita in Tehran. And it will also be held at the Zimmerman Community Center. And Molly Raphael, who's the new director of the Multnomah County Libraries, will be leading that discussion. Details on all of these events, by the way, are available online at pdxcityclub.org. Broadcast of City Club programs this quarter is made possible in part by corporate underwriting from Pacific Air, Portland General Electric, and Zimmer Gunsel Frasca, and we are very grateful for their support. I'd also like to acknowledge the Lincoln High School Constitution team, who is sponsored by Stoll Reeves Law Firm, and we appreciate their attendance always. Right here. Now let's get on with our very interesting program. I'd like to introduce first Brandon Mayfield, who is a lawyer in solo practice in the field of general law, and he's also a paralegal instructor at the College of Legal Arts. He's a native of Kansas, and he's a graduate of Portland State and Washburn State Universities, and he has a law degree from Lewis and Clark and received that degree in 1999. And Stephen Wax, who's the federal public defender and has been in the public defender's office since 1983. He's also an adjunct professor at Northwestern School of Law at Lewis and Clark. He's a graduate of Colgate University and of Harvard Law School. And now, if you'll welcome, please, Mr. Brandon Mayfield.
Hey, thank you, Corleen, and Bill, Wendy, and all of you for inviting me here. I think it's an honor. It's an opportunity to share with you, that is the citizens and city officials of Portland. And I want to correct Corleen. I was born in Coos Bay, so I suppose in some sense I could say I'm a Oregonian native, but it is true that I grew up, went to secondary school in Kansas, and I came back. I just want to say I love the Northwest, and particularly Portland. I went to school at Portland State University, graduated in 1992. I went to law school in Kansas, spent my last year at Lewis and Clark, but I'm always coming back and forth, and I also practice law in Newport, Oregon, and I remember telling my partners that I was kind of like a salmon coming back to spawn. But I'm here, I guess, to share with you, relate to you what happened to me, maybe share how I feel about being arrested as a material witness in connection with the Madrid, Spain bombing. It's almost a month to the day that I was giving a press conference here with my trusted and valuable friend, Steve Wax, at the Federal Public Defender's Office. I think it was May 24th that I was actually released. I was arrested on May 6th, spent 2 weeks in the Multnomah County Detention Center downtown, and I was released May 20th, 2 weeks in jail, and the following Monday, as you're probably aware, the prosecution had dropped the grand jury proceeding and the material witness proceedings against me. So it was almost a month ago that I was giving that press conference, and I remember at the time I was saying, I'm just now starting to stop shaking. And I'm a person who is, I've told Steve this before, I'm a person of weak constitution. And that's not to say that I have strong feelings about the Constitution. But it is true, so bear with me, because at times I'm actually in the spotlight, or have been since I was arrested. It's hard to be in the spotlight when you're in the Multnomah County Detention Center. But there was some inmates that got an inkling as to what was going on, and it did make me feel a little uncomfortable. They're human beings like all of us, but at the same time, I think that's part of my gripe, something I want to share with you and the public, that I don't think somebody who's arrested as a material witness, that is somebody who has something to share about criminal proceedings, should be foisted in the general population, that is the criminal population, even though we know that they're arrested with probable cause. There's something inherently wrong about that. If you're simply a witness, then something needs to be changed. I don't know how that would happen, probably legislatively, but for example, they could have put me up in the Hilton Hotel and paid my wages for a couple weeks while they detained me, if it was so important that I was going to be a flight risk. As it turns out, we know that on May 6th, the government said in their affidavit in support of my search warrant, said they had a 100% match on my fingerprints to this bag in Spain. So that would probably at least weigh in the mind of the judge, in this case, Judge Jones, as to whether or not I was a flight risk. But what I'm saying is there's got to be a better way, or a different system. The material witness statute was to protect the witness, and there was some things that were inherently wrong about how this all went down in my circumstances, and I think Steve may be able to talk in more detail about that. Again, I was arrested May 6th. I practice in Portland, Southwest Portland. I'm a solo practitioner. I've been doing it for about 2 years. I've been an attorney for about 4 years. and I love what I do. Well, I'll say I loved what I do. I still do, but I have to honestly admit that what happened to me has kind of soured me in some way. I mean, it was very uncomfortable going back to my law practice after I was released and then exonerated to some extent. But I'm still struggling to try to put my practice back together. In other words, I still have files that I've received from the government, and they came in at different times, even while I was detained. Some of them were returned. The government, not only did they arrest me, but they searched my law office in Southwest Portland. They searched my home in the Beaverton area, searched my cars and vehicles, but they took client files, and some of those were coming in pieces, and so I'm still having to sort through all that, because I think I have a responsibility to my clients to have them better informed as to what happened, and I think they need to know. But that's a difficult process. I mean, it's hard enough to start your own business and to go out there, and I mean, some of you, there may be some small business owners here, amongst us, and can appreciate how hard that is to do that, to stay afloat. So it's hard enough, and I was banging away trying to do that. Then this happened, and it disrupts that delicate circumstance of trying to get a business going. So I'm struggling. It was only yesterday I was telling my wife that it was for the first time that I felt almost normal. I mean, I haven't felt normal since I've been released, but it was just one of these days that it was almost a normal day, because I've had a lot of demands on my time. I'm not somebody who's used to being in front of the spotlight. Even the lights here are kind of bearing down on me, and as I said, I think I might be light sensitive, low blood sugar, but I'm trying to do the best I can, and it's an honor, almost. I feel like it's a duty to share what happened to me with others, and I'm not somebody who, I have to admit, I never joined the ACLU or any of some of these, I don't want to call them do-good organizations, but yeah, they're do-good organizations. But I did feel pretty strongly about civil liberties and the Bill of Rights. In fact, even before I was arrested, I was trying to. I have a small office in Portland, and it's a nice office, but it's a small office. And I had on the wall, there's you have all the switches. You have it on the wall for the circuit breakers in my office. And it was kind of ugly, so I wanted to cover it up with something. And it was situated in such a way that I knew I'd have to have 2 posters or something on top of it. And I thought, what can I put up there that would define who I am? And I'd known other attorneys, they would put maybe a salmon on the wall, or who knows, something that defines them. They like to fish. And so I was thinking, what would I put on the wall? And this will tell you what kind of budget I have. I really couldn't afford to get the nice, the frame and the poster. But what I wanted was, I was thinking maybe the Constitution. Maybe I'd put a copy of the Constitution up there. So in the end, I ended up doing the Bill of Rights, and I did amendments 1 through 5 on the one poster, and then 6 through 10 on the other one. And I couldn't really afford to get it, so I had to print it out on my own machine, like a 5x8, and I took it to the copy shop next door, blew it up big, so it's real grainy. And I just went to Kmart and bought the $12 big poster. So I stuck it up there, and it was, I won't say it's the one thing that the FBI didn't touch, but it was left on the wall, and they didn't confiscate it. But on the more serious side, this thing was it was pretty traumatic, what happened to me. And what people don't understand is, I think, is where we were heading on this thing. When I was arrested, I talked to Chris Schatz, which I wish he could be here, but he was the first public defender I spoke to on Thursday when I was arrested that evening, and then on Friday I talked to Steve and Chris, and they were a team, and they're very competent about what they're professionals, and they know what they're doing. And I mean, right away they do what they need to do, and they give me the gloom and doom, but and even I could perceive this as an attorney, that what was happening was I was not only a witness, but I got the sense I was being looked at as a defendant. I mean, that was real clear to me, and Steve and Chris had shared that with me and informed me that you need to start thinking about these things. That is, that what could happen is I could be indicted based on this fingerprint evidence and anything else that the government might find perusing through my office and my house. And that's a kind of a scary proposition, because if you think about it, it would be a pretty serious crime. That is, the maiming, killing of 200 people, injuring of 2,000, others. And it's at some point I was asking them, could I be charged with something or convicted with something in Spain? Yes, that's a possibility. Is there a death penalty in Spain? No, there's not. What about here in America? Yeah, there's a capital punishment on this. So these are the type of things I was having to think about early on, and to me it was, now in retrospect it doesn't seem like, that was going to happen. But when you're in jail and it's dark nights, and that's something that weighs heavily on, you, your heart, and your soul, and I certainly was considering that. And I remember telling Steve and Chris, I don't think that they were going to do this, but I said right away, I'm not going to plea anything on this. I'm not guilty of this. I didn't do it. And so we just operated from there. But at some point we had to operate under the assumption that this is your fingerprint. And I never accepted that. Even from day one when I went in to talk to Judge Jones on May 6th, I remember distinctly saying, amongst other things, like, I'm an officer of the court, please respect me as such. I even have a case filed here in the federal district court. But I also said, number one, this is not my fingerprint. Number two, if it is, I don't know how it got there. Number three, let me think about that. That's not my fingerprint. That was always my feeling, that even though Chris and Steve have to assume the worst and even move forward considering that it might be my fingerprint, I never really believed that. In trying to go through my mind who I had contacts with, where I'd been, I just never believed that would happen, particularly after I got a description of the bag, and it just didn't seem like something that I'd been anywhere near, for so long. And of course, I hadn't been out of the country for so long either. But I'm just letting you know that it's pretty serious stuff, and it was only 2 weeks, but it affected me quite a bit, and I was shaking after when I got out, and it's affected me still. A lot of positive things happened as a result. I've had a lot of support in the community. My wife and I, last weekend, for the first time, we'd got out of Portland for a while. We were invited to Chicago to the Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. We gave a short lecture in North Chicago, South Chicago. We talked to folks at the Muslim Civil Rights Center in South Chicago. And when we went to the airport here in Portland, there was a layover, and a lot of people were coming up to me saying, a handshake, and they recognized me. There was, several attorneys that talked to me. And so I've got a lot of support in the community. And I got less of that in Chicago in terms of people that recognized me, but here there was a lot of people that recognized me. And almost invariably, it was all positive. So I just wanted to thank the people of Portland, of the local community, because I do think Portland's a wonderful community. What a wonderful opportunity to have been invited here. And I just want to say that I love Portland. I've been soured a little bit because of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and one of the things we can debate is, do we need them or not? I don't think anybody's debating if we need them, but from my perspective, we need to think about what their role is, and are they actually profiling certain segments of our population. I feel to some extent they are, but I'll leave that to the experts. So obviously I'm biased. I don't think. We need to be secure, in our homes and persons, but not just from the bad guys, from the government as well. Here's this constitutional team, and they know what they've studied the Constitution, and in theory, the government, it's a contract between the people and the government. We give up our absolute, freedoms for an ordered liberty. And one of the government's roles, their primary role, is to keep us secure. So either on a local level or, state level or government level, you have to allow them to do that to some extent. But you can never allow them to do it and get too big, too bloated, and take away your individual rights and liberties. Because bottom line is you just don't want to trade your freedom for security, because you don't get either one. So I know we have limited time. I want to let Steve talk, And I enjoy the question and answer, so we'll try to get to that. But thank you for inviting me, Portland City Club, and everybody here. It feels good to be back. I just hope I can stay out of the criminal population. And thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks for the invitation. I have about 10 minutes to talk, and what I'm going to try to do is raise some concerns and issues and then get to the questioning. As the letter from KRAMER indicated, there is possibility of further litigation in the matter, so there are certain areas that I cannot go into, and if in the question and answer period you get a response that says, sorry, please respect that. My perspective on this is that Mr. Mayfield's situation should be a cautionary tale for all of us. Cautionary tale about what happens in a time of terror when we're dealing with the reality of terrorism, but also dealing with the fear that terrorism engenders and how different people respond to that fear. Should we be concerned about what happened to Mr. Mayfield? I think we should. But should we also be able to take some pride in the way in which our system addressed his situation? I think the answer to that question is yes as well. Let me set the stage for just a moment. What did people see? Well, what people saw back on May 6th was a man, a lawyer, who the media said had represented a person here in Portland who had been convicted of terrorism. A man, a lawyer, who was a Muslim himself, who had been matched, according to the FBI, 100% by a fingerprint to a bag that was found with detonators in it near a train station in Madrid and connected to the horrible bombing of March 11. What was the reaction of the community? Well, the reaction of the community at that time was, to a certain extent, my God, in Portland again, bewilderment. How could this be? To a certain extent, I think there was some skepticism about the government's position, although overall, I think there was probably more skepticism about Mr. Mayfield's denials, particularly given what had happened in the community in the preceding year or two with the Portland Seven, and particularly the arrest of Mike Hawash and the community rallying around, and then suddenly he enters a plea of guilty. The context, the stage here is that within 2 weeks of Mr. Mayfield's arrest, while there were leaks coming in large measure, or perhaps entirely, out of Washington, D.C., media stories quoting government officials in Washington, talking about the fingerprint, talking about some other things, word gets out that the Spanish are not so 100% sure that this fingerprint matches. The government responded in terms of the system, I think, with lightning speed. In terms of Mr. Mayfield's life and his perception, I'm sure it was an eternity. But the way in which our criminal justice system works, from an announcement in the media on around May 18 to a release on May 20 to the dismissal of the material witness proceeding on May 24, I don't think I've ever been in a case in this system, 30 years of practice, that has moved quite that fast. All right, there's an area then in which we can take some pride. But what about some of the concerns that this situation raises? Well, Mr. Mayfield raises one that is certainly in his mind, and that is the question about profiling. Profiling of people of particular religions or ethnic backgrounds, although in this instance our Coos Bay native does not have a Middle Eastern surname, but he is Muslim. It seems to me it is critical for all of us to withhold judgment on that. A lot of people have views. We don't have all the facts. And before anyone comes to a final decision, is this an example of profiling or not? I think it's critical that we all know what happened, what the FBI knew at what stage. The information that is available at this point in terms of the public record would show that the FBI made a blind match. There are questions being raised about that. The House Judiciary Committee and one of the senators on the Senate Judiciary Committee have made a formal request of the Department of Justice to conduct an inquiry into what happened with the fingerprint. What did the FBI do? And my understanding is that the Inspector General of the Department of Justice has accepted their request and is going to be conducting an inquiry. I know that our U.S. Attorney, KRAMER, is very concerned about that and has been making inquiries of her own. We don't have all the facts, and I think that it's important for us to keep that in mind as we think about what happened. On the other hand, regardless of the facts, we also have the reality of perception. The fear that exists in our community these days is not only a fear of the next terrorist act, but also the fear that is perhaps more prevalent in the Muslim community than in the non-Muslim community, but fear of the government, fear that there is profiling. And I think that it's very important for our governmental leaders to address that fear and to recognize its reality, because it is a reality. And one of the things that in talking with Brandon we've talked about is how that carries over into the fear that some of his clients have, fear that some of his prospective clients may have. And we need to address that and to be concerned about that. Another issue that comes up here involves the material witness statute and the use or misuse of the material witness statute. Now, on the one hand, one could say the material witness statute exists to enable the government to try to obtain information in an investigation from someone in an in-custody basis if they have a concern that a person would flee. All right, that's what the law says. But as Brandon told you, part of the reality that we had to deal with was the concern that with a 100% match, mistaken as we learned, in a fingerprint, you have to be concerned about indictment for capital terrorism murder. So, material witness statute. I think that we need it, and somewhat perversely perhaps, one of the things that we talked about was let's try to stay in that material witness basket, if you will, and not find ourselves dealing with, Brandon, as a defendant. As a lawyer, I think I would much rather, for at least some reasonably confined period, be representing a person as a material witness than representing a person who's been indicted and is facing the death penalty. Now, there are then some, multiple layers of reality in terms of how we use that statute. Another aspect of the material witness statute is the question of leaks. And you pick up the newspapers from May 6 on, and you'll find a lot of stories. And there is a tremendous amount of concern about that. Judge Jones issued a gag order because of the concern about the way in which that harms the witness. Everyone in the community hears from the official leaks things that they just should not have heard. Karen Immergut says that part of the reason why she cannot be here is because of the grand jury secrecy rules under which she operates, under which she did operate, but under which apparently some people in Washington did not operate, or they chose to opt out. That's how those news stories get out there. Now, that's a problem, because that creates tremendous harm to the person who's supposed to be protected by the secrecy provisions. My understanding is that there are inquiries going on in Washington now about that. Inquiries that some congresspeople are directing and inquiries that the U.S. Attorney here is pursuing as well. Information that we need to get. Why did that happen? What was the motive? Some of the leaks said that some of the people in Washington, if the media is to be believed, had no intention of ever getting any information from Mr. Mayfield, because they knew that if he got a lawyer, his lawyer was going to remind him that the Fifth Amendment protection is for the innocent as well as the guilty. And that is something that we really need to be concerned about. In the arguments in the Hamdi and Padilla cases, two U.S. citizens who've been taken out of our justice system, in arguing before the U.S. Supreme Court, the Solicitor General told the justices, we're taking people out of the criminal justice system, out of the military justice system, holding them in brigs, because we know that if they are in a system with a lawyer, the lawyer is going to help them assert their rights. Said to the U.S. Supreme Court by the spokesperson for the Attorney General. Now, as a lawyer, as a citizen, as a person who believes in civil liberties, that troubles me. That our government can say, we know the protections that our system offers, and we're going to intentionally take people outside of it because we are able to define war in a new way. You know, we're in a war on terror. To redefine people from being criminal defendants or material witnesses and call them enemy combatants. Based on what? Based on an executive order. That, I think, is something that we should all be troubled about. The Patriot Act. I understand that you had a debate about the Patriot Act some months ago. I'm just going to say a word or two about it here. One word is that we have in a pleading that was filed on May 14 an example of the way in which the breaking of the wall between criminal law and the intelligence community can harm an innocent man. That May 14 pleading says, filed by the government under seal at the time but since unsealed, that information that was obtained in the searches of Mr. Mayfield's home and law office has been and will be distributed to a list of 7 agencies, including the CIA, the NSA, the Department of Treasury, etc. So the wall between criminal enforcement and intelligence, broken by the Patriot Act, has now resulted in information obtained from Mr. Mayfield being distributed worldwide. What should we do about that? Are there times when that wall has been an impediment to law enforcement in the terror arena? Sure. Are there valid reasons for allowing the communication in some circumstances? My answer is yes. Are there tremendous dangers and potentials for danger? Yes. And what I think this case helps us do is to focus on an example of the way in which that can harm the innocent. We should get to questions. Law office search here raises a host of questions. The final point that I want to make, about which I think it is again important for me to caution everyone, wait till you hear all the facts, and that has to do with the fingerprint issue. How do you get a mismatch here? How does this occur? And what does it say to us about the FBI? What does the FBI's statements to Congress and to the public about the fingerprint tell us about their good or lack of such good faith? We don't know the answers to that yet. And I think that we should be thankful that some of the Congress people are pursuing at least semi-independent inquiries, inquiry outside of the FBI itself through the Inspector General's office. And I know I, for one, am eagerly awaiting what I hope will be the public results of that. Fingerprints, the forensic fingerprint community, for those of you who are interested, go online. There are a number of websites, and you can find tremendous debate going on now about fingerprints. Are they 100% accurate or are they not? What protocols exist? What protocols need to be changed? Let me stop so we can get to the questions. Those are just some thoughts and questions that I throw out.
Well, unfortunately, we have only probably 20 or 25 minutes for questions because I think these will engender a lot of them. With respect to questions at City Club, it's a privilege of members only to be able to ask questions of our guests, and the Constitution team are members, and so they will also be allowed to ask questions. We have also question cards on the table should you have something that you would like to send up to the front to be asked. I would ask that you respect the other people who need to ask questions and keep your questions very, very short, 20 seconds or less. Our first question will be asked by our board host, Bill KRAMER. Bill is a member of the Board of Governors, and he is the club treasurer, and he is a health consultant in private practice. Bill?
Thanks, Courtney. I have a question for either or both of you, not about your specific case, but a question about broader public policy issues and processes. I'm not an attorney. I'm a citizen who's concerned about, as many of us are, about both security as well as protection of civil liberties. We know that a lot of our current laws and legal processes were set, particularly around wartime issues, were set up in a time when wars were more conventional, waged between states, nations with uniformed armies. Given that we're in a new situation and we face a significant kind of threat, in many ways different from anything we've faced before, and in this particular situation, a horrific attack that killed hundreds of people in Madrid, what are the kinds of actions that would be appropriate for government to take to protect our security while also protecting our civil liberties?
Is the mic on? Yes, okay. I think that it is important to recognize that the government has been quite successful in the past decade in arresting, prosecuting, and incarcerating any number of terrorists without declaring them enemy combatants, without abandoning the legal system that has served us so well for the 200+ years of the existence of the Republic. It seems to me that we undervalue the wonderful system that we have. We undervalue the strength of our criminal justice system. We undervalue the strength of our judicial system if we say we need to abandon it in order to pursue people who we will now call something other than potential criminals. Are there uses for some additional enforcement tools? As I indicated before, I think the answer to that is yes. But the balance is what I am afraid that we are, at least some people, are losing sight of. And I think that that balance needs to be more trust and belief in the system that we have.
Mark Peterson, City Club member. I had a question about matching fingerprints, pretty general. When you match a fingerprint, I think it's in a computer, I'm assuming. Do you match against the entire group, or do you eliminate what you're going to match against, some specified criteria?
Let me try as a non-expert to give a non-expert Fingerprint 101 answer. The way in which the systems work is that when you have a latent print, an unknown, you have a fingerprint examiner who will look at it and plot certain points from it. Those points are then fed into what's called the IAFIS system, the Integrated Automated Forensic Identification or Fingerprint Identification System. You ask the computer to spit out a list of possibles based on the points that you as an examiner have identified from the latent that you've lifted off the item. Once you get that list, the computer ranking it for you if you've asked it to do so, giving you 5 names or 20 names or however many, or not names, knowns. Then the fingerprint examiner looks at the latent, does a comparison with the knowns that the computer has spat out. That, however, is your first potential area for error. If the examiner has identified points that should not be going in, if he makes a mistake in terms of what he asks the computer, garbage in, garbage out. And it may well be that what happened in this case is that an error was made in terms of entering the data, so that the list that the computer spat out had Mr. Mayfield's prints on it. We don't know that. That's one of the questions that the congressional people are asking about. Your next level at which error could be made is the examiner looking at the list of possibles that the computer spits out may make a mistake, then passes it on to a supervisor, and you now then get into a whole host of potential psychological issues that I know Professor Riesberg at Reed College, who is interested in psychology of memory, is particularly interested in, where you get suggestive identification in the fingerprint process. And that's one of the things that the forensic people are talking about, and which may lead to change in some protocols.
Bill Savage. Is this on? Bill Savage, City Club member. Mr. Mayfield, you mentioned, well, first of all, I just wanted to say a lot of support for you. I think a lot of people in the room echo that. But you mentioned the difficulty about being housed with the general criminal population, and that perhaps there should be a better way. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, of what sorts of problems you ran into being in the general population?
I think it's the general one, just being detained and not being able to leave and behind bars. That's the problem. I can't say that I had. I mean, I was in a lockdown situation for the first 7 days, so the area I could walk around in when I was in my cell was, roughly a 5x8 area, which is pretty small, and I was allowed to walk, maybe 1 hour a day in a 24-hour period, twice if you're lucky. Then the walk area that you have is smaller than most of our living rooms if we are in a modest Portland suburb, and it's just it's difficult to do anything. If you make a phone call to anybody, everything is monitored. Nobody tells you, they don't tell you what your rights are. It's not like guards are coming to you saying, are you comfortable here? Do you need some bed sheets? I mean, some of that stuff doesn't happen. I just don't think that we just need a different system. I think historically the material witness statute was, say for example, if you were a mafia member and you wanted to share something about Bugsy Malone and you were concerned about your safety, then it was to protect you and keep it secret. And as Steve said, to arrest me, and at the same time, just on the heels of that, for Newsweek to be splashing this all over the place and saying I'm connected, have a fingerprint that's on a bag in Spain at the site of the Madrid, Spain bombing, doesn't serve me or the purpose of the statute in protecting me. And quite frankly, there was times when I was scared. I mean, I was looking over my back, constantly. Because you're in there with some of these people, even though they're arrested with probable cause, maybe parole violation, there's some serious, criminals in there. I mean, at least 1 or 2 admitted that, yeah, I'm guilty, not knowing, who I was when I'm sitting there being transferred from place to place. But yeah, I did it. My advice to them as the attorney that they didn't know is, well, you might want to talk to your, public defender, and, you might be able to, plea down or something like that. Don't just give up. I mean, but the criminal justice system is to protect both the guilty and the innocent. That is, we have this idea of representation. So the affidavit in support of my arrest did suggest, as Steve had said, that I had represented Jeffrey Battle, one of the Portland Seven. Hadn't met him before. I was approached by members of the community that were concerned about his son, Esau Battle, and because he was taken into custody by the state when he was arrested. And I practice in the area of domestic relations and family law, and have handled child custody issues, so it was appropriate for them to approach me. And I went about trying to put him in the care of somebody who is responsible relative. And we almost did that until Mom came into the picture, who had not been raising him, who was from Texas, came in, and then I raised the concern that is she somebody who could safely take care of her son, having not been there for him for the first 5 years of his life. And it's an appropriate issue to raise. But in the end, Mom was able to take custody of her son. Was I upset by that? No. But I mean, I believe strongly in the rights of parents to raise their children. It's another Bill of Rights. It's another right. It's inherent in this idea of liberty and due process of law. So I'm not upset with the result. I guess I just think there's a problem. I'm getting off track here, but I'm kind of going back to Bill of Rights. That it's important that we uphold our rights, particularly individual rights. And as far as being housed in the Multnomah County Detention Center, those guys, for the most part, the guards and administrators, are doing what they have to do. But at the time you're in, you just don't know who you can trust and not trust. And there was some times I felt very uncomfortable in there. I'll tell you, at one point there was somebody in the cell next to me who, we get pencils. He put a pencil in his ear. Actually was bleeding in his cell and had to call the nurse. And that same person could be out when I'm walking around, who could put a pencil in my eye. You just don't feel comfortable there. That's all.
Paul Millius, City Club member. My original question has largely been answered, but I'd like to make an observation and ask you for comment if you choose. We see some of the excesses of the legislation that's arisen around the drug war and no-knock searches and so on, and how the RICO statutes have started to are becoming more and more used in cases where there was not organized crime, which was their original intent. I would urge everyone and anyone who might listen, to consider that the Constitution of the United States protects us from the excesses of our government, not the Taliban, not Saddam Hussein, our government. And furthermore, if they did it to him, they can do it to you. Make no mistake about that. Would you care to comment?
Sure. The Patriot Act is not limited to the war on terror. The tools that Congress gave the executive branch in the Patriot Act can be used to prosecute, investigate any crime. I think it's important for everyone to understand that, and one of the things that I would hope Congress would take a very serious look at, if it doesn't sunset many of the provisions, is limiting them to terror. Now, you then get into the problem of the definition and redefinition of terror. We redefine war in this process to deal with what traditionally has been considered a criminal justice issue. Well, you can redefine terror as well, and I would be concerned about the potential for that, even if the Patriot Act was limited in that way.
Guinevere Milius, City Club member. I think you may have just responded a bit to my question. I've been reading about the Patriot Act, and the thing that I've been scratching my head over is who is a terrorist and who can be defined as an enemy combatant, and is there really a definition there, or could we start stretching it to people whose political views we don't agree with, and people who may have things to say about the Constitution or the rights that protect them that we don't really agree with, or how far can this go, and how easy is it for the government to basically remove someone from a normal criminal justice or justice proceeding, basically strip their citizenship rights and take them out of the country and try them for whatever they feel like trying them for?
Well, the Supreme Court is going to give us some guidance before June 30 when it decides the Hamdi and Padilla cases and the cases on the Guantanamo detainees. And those, I have said, are the most important cases that I think that I will have seen yet in my lifetime. Absolutely critical. whether the Supreme Court says that the executive can, by its own choice of terms, define what is war, who or what is a terrorist. You know, the recent disclosures about, the definition of torture and the Attorney General's memos that have been made public and those that probably haven't been made public, raise the same issue. If you give the executive unchecked power to define, you then have, I hate to use this, but Orwellian language and political type of issues. I think that that's the danger, that's the potential. Unchecked power, if the Congress can't say something, if the courts can't say something to check the executive, there is no limit on what can be defined as war or terror.
I want to add something here, and this is really important. This is a crucial issue. I mean, what was raised right there. The problem we're having right here is the Constitution, when it was first envisioned, we had Article 1, 2, and 3, which is in order of importance. Many look at it that way. Article 1, legislative branch; 2 is the executive; 3 is the judicial. And if you look at how much is said about them and how they're organized, the judicial takes up the least amount of space in that third article. But it doesn't mean they have the least amount of importance. The legislative branch isn't most important because they make the laws. The executive branch is the one that enforces them. But you have to have some oversight by the legislative branch if they're going to confer power on the executive branch. But the important thing is, from the very beginning, and this goes back in our constitutional law students may or may not have looked at this case, but it's Calder versus Bull. It was, I think, 1799, so the 200th anniversary was just a few years ago. It was a case in which the Supreme Court justices were battling as to whether or not, how much power they're going to have, and should they defer to the legislative and executive branch. And at the end of the day, they deferred to some extent to the legislative and executive branch. But you have to remember that the judicial branch, it's not only their primary function is to interpret laws, to interpret the laws that the legislative branch has enacted, and those orders and regulations, legislations or regulations that the executive branch has enacted. But they're not only an interpreter, they have to be a referee. They have to be a referee as to what's out of bounds. And you also have to remember that when the framers of our Constitution took this blueprint for our government to the people in the states, they said, wait a minute, there's a problem here. We don't want to have too much government. We don't want the government to infringe on our rights. Where's our rights? That's when they had to go back and draft the Bill of Rights. So look at it as a whole. It's not just Article 1 through 7 and Article 1 through 3 for the blueprint. It's the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, which guarantees our individual rights. So we have to be concerned that the minority is not oppressed by the majority. And that's what's happening right now. That's the problem. That's key. Because if we lose that, I mean, who are we as a people? We stand for freedom and democracy and liberty. So if you don't wake up, then they're gonna take it away. You have to fight for your freedom, just as you have to fight for your security.
Bill Parrish, City Club member. I have a question for Brandon. I believe we have a great system, a fabulous system, but one of the things that's really gotten off track the last few years is consumer protection in general. Tomorrow, Ralph Nader is actually having a rally at Benson High School at 5 o'clock. He's running for president, the greatest consumer advocate of the last 40 years. And my question is this: do you think any differently about this whole notion of Nader's influence on the political process now?
Well, that's interesting, and I don't know if I guess I'll just say it. I'll just come out and say I voted for Bush regrettably. So.
I don't think it's on. Now it is. Carol Witherell, City Club member. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your courage. You've given us several things to think about with respect to restoring democracy and protecting democracy. What other critical issues should citizens be mindful of as we go to the polls in November?
regarding the balance of powers or other aspects of the Patriot Act that this case and similar cases raise?
I would say demand of your, your representative, whether it's Kerry or Bush or Nader or Kucinich, that they have to address these issues. I mean, I've seen Kucinich address some of these issues, but this should be part of our public discourse and debate, this idea of civil liberties and freedom. I mean, it's okay to talk about, welfare and Medicaid and health care. These are important issues, but don't, make sure we don't drop out these ideas of freedom and liberty. That needs to be part of our public debate. It has been, historically, but I see less of it, in recent elections. So you need to demand this of your officials, either on a local level or, presidential candidates. You need to make that part of the public debate. You need to demand this of your candidates, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. And also, this is important too, this Patriot Act that's going to sunset, you need to call your representatives. I don't know if the city of Portland, if they've already passed some kind of resolution, I don't know if denouncing the Patriot Act is the correct term, but I know a lot of cities have done it in communities, and if it's probably up for review, I would say, let those dangerous provisions sunset, not the entire Patriot Act, but there's some really dangerous provisions in the Patriot Act that need to sunset, and they're also proposing the restoration of civil liberties. There's a Restoration of Civil Liberties Act that's being proposed by Senator Feingold and others. I hope it gets more bipartisan support, but I would say if you have an opportunity to press that, then please do so.
I would add the First Amendment to that, and I think that Mr. Mayfield's case puts that squarely in front of us as well. He is a member of a religion that is a minority in this country, and I think that the way in which the questions about profiling come up in this case, whether the answers justify the questions or not, time will tell. But I think it should remind us that the First Amendment talks about freedom of religion, freedom from religion, freedom for religion, and that in terms of how we as a country define ourselves and how we view religion within the society, this case speaks to that as well.
Arnold Kogan, member of the City Club. Mr. Mayfield, thank you for coming here today. And most people who lead a law-abiding life assuming that what happened to you could never happen to them. And I'd be interested to know if you have any plans to educate the public, the Americans, people in this country, about what you've been experiencing these last month or two. Thank you.
As I said, I was invited to Chicago and spoke to the Muslim Civil Rights Center. I've been invited by a number of other organizations. Did have an opportunity to make a press conference. So it's a little scary to be in front of the public eye, but it's a platform. So I mean, I hope even this afternoon I'm doing that to some extent. But yeah, I feel honored, and even that it's a duty for each of us as a citizen to do that. So hopefully we can do it more, either on at a public level or on a personal level.
Pat Rumor, City Club member, and this is Mr. Wax, you raised the issue of the fear in the Muslim and Arab communities around profiling, and I'm wondering, and either of you can respond, if you're aware if the U.S. Attorney's Office or the FBI or any of those who, in a sense, have some responsibility around this have invited in members of the Muslim or Arab communities. Has there been any kind of proactive, even within the confines, to try to reassure or to hear from these affected communities what their concerns are? And if there hasn't been, do you have any suggestions to public officials as to what they could do to help ameliorate this situation? Thank you.
I'm aware of some things that the local U.S. Attorney and FBI have done, and I'm sure that as the case either completely ends or goes forward, that they will be doing more. And I am confident that part of that will be to make public some of the information about how this all began that, as I understand it at this point, will help allay some of those fears. My sense is that it is critical for them to speak to the issue. And regardless of what the facts are, I think that it's important for them to speak out and to let people know that they were operating here in this community in an above board and an entirely appropriate way. And I think that the facts will, at the end of the day, bear that out. But they, I think, have an obligation and recognize the obligation to speak at the appropriate time.
That ends our program today, July 9th at the Governor, and thank you so much to both of you for being here and helping enlighten us on this.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We're adjourned.